Welcome to PACKOLUTION. In this podcast series, you'll hear the experts of the packaging industry talking about sustainability and the future of packaging. It is brought to you by Watron and hosted by one of its founders, Michaela Wachtel, and Sales Director Ton Kniepscher.
Hi, welcome to another episode of PACKOLUTION, the disruptive podcast brought to you by Watron. Today we have Sebastian Emig, Director General of the European Snack Association, as our guest. Welcome, Sebastian.
Thank you very much, Ton. It's a pleasure to be with you and really looking forward to an engaging and interesting discussion.
Absolutely.
Sebastian, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career path?
With pleasure. As you might imagine, I'm in Brussels for quite some time now, the last 10 years nearly with the European Snacks Association. And before that, I've been working with other trade associations with the intention in order to shape policymaking on the European level, dealing with transport, health and food. And after I've been working in those associations, this wonderful opportunity came along as the position of the Director General of the European Snacks Association. Having been working in food for some time before, already having developed a network there was a fantastic opportunity for me to join. And since day one, it was a pleasure to work with our members in order to make snacking healthier and more sustainable.
Presumably you're based in Brussels because the EU is there. Does that make European Snack Association a lobby group? Everybody sees lobbying as a negative power behind closed doors. How do you see this? Is there anything you can explain a bit about?
Indeed. Yes, sometimes from the outside, this policy-making circle seems quite opaque and not really visible from the outside. Hence, lobbying indeed can turn into, I would say, a negative connotation. But you have to see, I personally like to talk about advocacy. And there in Brussels, really trying to bring through their interests. You don't have only industry sectors like ours or companies. You do have regions, towns, you have non-governmental organizations. Everybody tries to inform and educate policymakers about their interests. Not only those, but also opinion formers who shape further than the policy landscape. And I like to see ESA as this driving force for really educating and informing those people in the decision seat, like members of the European Parliament or the Commission, in order to show them, how snacking has evolved over the last years, how we made snacks healthier and more sustainable. And this is the predominant objective for our task there in order to defend members' interests, but at the same time, really bring in the business realities, because sometimes lawmaking is disconnected from business realities. And as idealistic they might seem during the discussion, once this is being brought to paper, then industry would have an issue and a challenge. Hence, it's for us in order to move the needle back, in order to become more, I would say, implementable and tangible. Hence, this is the key task that we have there.
You mentioned the name sustainability. What moves the snack world in terms of packaging? Because that's one of the drivers for sustainability. And what is so special about packaging for snacks compared to other groceries?
Look, the majority of savory snacks, they are packaged using these flexible films. They are one of the most resource-efficient options which are currently available. I know we are going to talk later about some other options currently in development, but this is, I would say, the majority that is being used. And the packaging for us is usually made of several different types of plastics laminated together, generally including a thin layer of aluminium. So this is, I would say, quite simple in terms of the packaging, but then later on for recyclability and sustainability, it gets more challenging, and specifically because looking at snacks, what we need to have, the packaging has to provide an excellent moisture, oxygen, aroma, and UV light barrier properties. Because like this, the food is protected and the shelf life is significantly extended, and hence reducing food waste. For us and for our members, obviously longer shelf life also allows products to be exported within the single market and to compete in foreign markets. So finally, it's worth noting that savory snacks, if you look at them, we're not talking only about potato crisps or nuts or salt sticks or meat snacks or tortilla chips and so on. They really differ significantly in density, size, shape, and fragility, which makes the packaging and techniques and technologies much, much more challenging, like, for example, for other products.
It's more an impact product.
Indeed.
Snacks sometimes don't have the best reputation. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that and say why snacks are so under attack by some influential groups.
That's unfortunately true. So you're right in that. And savory snacks, just like other convenient foods, treats, biscuits, chocolates, and so on, are just the perfect target for some campaigners and activists. And we see that also more and more, that also from international organizations or sometimes even members from the European Parliament, that there is not a lot of information existent, and hence it's an easy target, I would say. Take, for example, the war on sugar, which is currently happening for the last couple of years, I might like to say. So it's really easy to pick out one of the so-called bad nutrients and forget about all the beneficial sides of it, and also the fun that is, within the diet it's given. Look at snacks. For us, since I've been working right now for the European Snacks Association, is the following. Snacks are a treat, and we are there to promote them to be consumed in moderation. Nobody from our members is going to say, snacks are to become the main part of a diet. Absolutely not. And this is easily forgotten. Hence, we stand out, and scapegoats are always useful when you want to promote a certain vision of the world. So it's valid for the food policy too. And looking in the future, there have been and there will be attempts to demonize single ingredients like sugar, fat, or salt, or categories, for example, breakfast cereals or soft drinks. So now currently what we face in Brussels is more and more the trend to look at the level of processing. Some policymakers and press, you read more and more the term about ultra-processed foods. So that's a convenient reading for certain influencing groups in order to massage that into the policymaking process. So for us, it's very clear we are there in Brussels in order to set the scene and to make the picture right, and especially inform these, I would say, influencers and campaigners who have this specific point of view, to tell them, look, guys, look what we've done in the last decades in terms of reformulating products. That means products which are on the market. We've taken out salt, we've taken out saturated fats, slowly but carefully, because if you do that rushing, then you're going to have consumers who are going to say, this product is not tasty anymore because they reduced salt immediately in one step by 30%. So we gradually, increase that without talking too much about that. This is the one thing. On the other side, if you look at new product developments, we have new formula in oils, we have new ingredients. For example, there's a huge trend right now in chickpeas and pea protein snacks. So a lot has been going on, and I think over time also our critics will come to the understanding that savory snacks can indeed be part of a healthy and balanced diet.
So you have focused on the nutritional point of view now. Is this attack solely linked to the health issue or also to the impact on the waste stream?
If you would have asked me that question a couple of years ago, obviously I would have said, yes, this is predominantly the health issue angle that is being put forward by campaigners and activists. Now, however, as consumers become more plastic savvy and regulators introduce tighter rules, and plastic sustainability has been moving very much up on everybody's list for packaging priorities. So I'd say we are under close scrutiny on both fronts right now. But similarly, with nutrition and health-related issues, manufacturers are proactive in tackling these packaging challenges, and there are already hundreds of initiatives across the globe to improve the circularity of snacks packaging. I mean, we have several of our members, they're in partnerships with third parties. They've introduced collection points across the country. So I think, for us, it's something, a priority on the agenda that will not go away, that we have invested and will continue to invest our resources in order to become better and, also in the worldwide situation, become really a predominant force there and a market leader. So I think, like before, consumers, as you asked, they are becoming more informed about that. But I see also consumers there in the responsibility. If you have the consumers and they are not really educated about littering, we will not be the only ones, us as industry, who's going to move the needle in a positive direction.
Absolutely correct. The garbage on the street doesn't get there on its own, doesn't get there from
Indeed.
the supermarket shelf. But what alternatives are currently available for snack packaging? Do you see developments there with your members?
Yes, we do see them. I don't want to deny that, but for the time being, they're very few. They're growing because they're still, also from your company side, there are developments, but I think we need to increase the magnitude of the scale here. So it's our main members, the manufacturers, they continuously invest to improve the sustainability of the packaging. For instance, to increase the recyclability or to make them biodegradable, compostable. However, today there are only a limited number of flexible packaging materials that are effective, possible alternatives to current technologies. So the key issue here is how functional these alternatives are when compared to existing packaging solutions. So this is the one angle there. And the reality is that there's, for the time being, no real equivalent performance standard. And besides that, we have to also see that the infrastructure needs to be ready, and educational campaigns, as I mentioned earlier, towards consumers. Governments have to move involved. So it's an entire universe which has to shift rightly in order to make this not only, being imposed on industry. We've seen some manufacturers successfully moving to paper-based material on some products, and these are then 100% recyclable via the paper stream. Some are going with more compostable packaging, others use single polymer laminate. There are bits and bobs, but there is not the big, I would say, silver bullet to be seen for the time being, at least.
So basically you're saying that the plastics at the moment can't be replaced everywhere as packaging for snacks because of shelf lives and functionality.
Indeed, true, indeed. I don't want to say unfortunately, because, it is simply of the unique properties of the flexible plastic laminates. This is why we rely mostly still, and our members, on that. Now, the objective is not to stop using plastics altogether, but to really promote the circularity to its fullest. Because, if I compare, for example, the PET bottles, in some countries you have schemes which are implemented, and they start really from the producer of the material itself, the bottles producer, over then to the fillers, over to the supermarkets, then going on to the consumers. And the consumers do use their certain systems and schemes in order to really close the loop of the circularity. So that really means we have to make this leap from linear to circular. It's challenging, but there are some, I would say, regulation in force, like the packaging waste directive from the Commission, which really help us in order to implement an effective and workable extended producer responsibility system.
During our research, we were reading the term environmental labeling. Environmental labeling is really an option for this snack industry. Can you maybe say something about that?
Indeed, and I think it's a big buzzword that is currently, reverberating in this echo chamber of Brussels, where we see it's popping up more and more. So I can tell you, by the end of the year, the Commission will launch a legislative proposal to tackle misleading claims, so the so-called green claims initiatives, to allow consumers and other market actors to make more sustainable decisions. But this is only the first step.
A good one, though.
It is. That's absolutely so. I think we are on the right track here, and we see the beginning. I'm really looking forward, when this is in full force and fully fledged. But I think we're on the right track. I agree with you, Tom. So, and by the end of 2024, we are expecting a sustainable labeling framework, which will tackle aspects related to both the actual information to be provided in relation to food sustainability, as well as the verification of this information. So when we talked with the Commission, they said they will not reinvent the wheel, but rather refer to legislation which already exists, as long as this would prevent the further proliferation of labels. So again, look, we're talking about food labeling for years now, and the Food Information to Consumers Regulation is in force. It's going to be reviewed. So what we really need to be aware of and wary of is, like also for the food labeling, we need to have a label that is understandable, that takes into account the most parts in terms of, the sustainability discussion, understandable by the consumer. There has to be an interest from the consumer, and we need to see that something like that is not being just developed on 1 or 2 member states. They impose that, and by this, risking then the dissolution of the single market. So I think the European Commission, like with the food labeling, has to have a leading role to protect the single market and to implement a sensible eco and environmental labeling scheme.
When we talk about snacks, you already said that, of course, you always have to keep in mind that people are not supposed to snack too much. So you're making maybe smaller packages, which is supposed to be more healthy, but then smaller packages are not really sustainable. So this would be a pro for bigger packaging. So there is quite a bias. The objective in terms of sustainability is to make the healthier and sustainable choice the easier choice. So is this really possible when you think about what I just mentioned as an example?
That's a good question as well. Well, it should be possible, but it's going to be really challenging. And coming to your example right now about the packs, this is a dichotomy that we are facing when we talk to the European Commission or MEPs, because we can then be put as a skateboard on one side. So we tell them, indeed, we're reducing the packaging in order to make the portions smaller, in order to help people, to consume our products in moderation, make them resealable so they don't consume everything in one eating. And then on the flip side, you have exactly that. You have the increased food waste, which you try to reduce as well by, reducing when you cut off the packets from one long foil, that you make the endings small and everything. But it's true. So is it possible? Again, I think, it should be possible, but it's going to be challenging because we do not all have the same vision of what is acceptable and not acceptable. So what is worth doing and what not when it comes to changing our food environment? I mean, it starts in the personal household. It starts in your personal diet. What are you willing to accept? If you go to the butcher, just going to buy eco meat, bio meat, and so on. Are you, not as affluent that you can afford it on a regular basis? So I think overall, we all can agree on certain principle, but the devil lies in the detail. If you look at the complexity of the food system with myriads of actors, I mean, you have the producers, you have the suppliers, you have the retailers, and these are just the big blocks. But if you really dig deeper and you have the interdependency of the different players, it's hugely complex and complicated. So let me give you an example. For instance, we see the endless discussion on Nutri-Score, which is a food label that has been developed in France. It's now being taken up by several other countries. Even in our sector, this is being taken up. So, but in the end, you have to ask yourself, does this really, nudge consumers towards healthier choices? And if so, are we okay with the fact that it potentially discriminates other certain products that also have a valid place in the diet? What, for example, look, if tomorrow we say there's a ban for one of the products that you love due to the fact there's too much salt or too much sugar inside, would you be okay with something like that? So it's really a question that we each have to ask ourselves. That's why the work of the European Commission, especially with environmental labeling and providing health and sustainable choices for everyone, is tremendously difficult. I think we have to have as the ground basis, we have to take the informed consumer, which should be the norm, not the exception. And once we really take this for granted, that we have an informed consumer in front of us who can digest the information on the label, then I think for this consumer, it's totally possible with the means that we have already now to choose the more healthier and the more sustainable choice in order to build a balanced diet.
Do you think the EU should play a more prominent role in here and not, say, the member states?
I think, look, the European Commission, one of their predominant principles they have to follow and their objectives is to uphold the integrity of the single market. And I must say that in the last couple of years, when it comes to food labeling, because this is, at least I have information about, I cannot really speak about other sectors, sometimes they have not really fulfilled this principle. So they have failed to a certain degree. For me, indeed, I think it's excellent that you have ideas coming from member states. I think it's excellent if you have a testing for that in certain member states, but then it has to be voluntary, time-based. There has to be an evaluation and assessment. And when they have the results, this has to be flowing into the decision making of the European Commission. Because after all, if we have some front runners, we go back to the example I said just earlier, Nutri-Score with France, we have an algorithm that has been developed by a scientist, which is, I would say, questionable in some aspects. And this scientist or group of scientists holds the uniform and unilateral opinion and power in order to change and adapt that label or that algorithm, which is then resulting in label. This cannot be the solution. On the contrary, I see that as a problem. So it has to be science-based, it has to be on a broad scientific basis, and it has to be implemented by an institution who is not biased, which I would 100% see as a European Commission.
Basically, the discussion is sometimes too much facts-free. And so what sort of political conditions must be created for packaged product to become more sustainable, in your opinion?
I think there are really 3 points which it boils down to. So first of all, it has to be, as I mentioned in the intro, a good understanding of the business realities. So taking symbolic measures to please the opinion and win votes is not helping and will never help. I can see, as you just mentioned, Tom, is the fact that there's too much emotions going on, and we not rely on those, but the heart is deciding more often than the brain. And I think we should not follow that route. We should listen to both, but facts should decide when we make law. Secondly, a proper impact assessment of proposed measures is undeniably an absolute basis for any kind of discussion, because every intended and unintended consequences must be assessed. You cannot just rush ahead and you think, this is going to go well. You just close your eyes and you run into it for 1-2 years, and then you look back after this period of time and say, my God, what have we done? So you may find out that some measures may be counterproductive and in the end to environment. So really a proper impact assessment is necessary. And third and finally, there must be dialogue and trust between the public authorities and private operators. Non-governmental organization consumers have to be involved there. I don't want this to, as you refer to, say, behind closed doors, just between the authorities and industry. No. All players around the table influencing, I would say, this entire law and regulation making have to be around the table. So that's really, dialogue has to be there in order, because everybody's around the table, it will help design better policies that can actually make real life and real business conditions much more favorable for everybody.
And it gets more traction with the people. If the people need to accept it, the consumers, then they need to be involved in the discussion, correct? Yeah.
Totally right.
Okay, we're already at the end of our podcast today. And since this is the PACKOLUTION podcast talking about packaging, we always like to ask our guests about their vision for the future about packaging. And so we would also like to ask you, is a world without packaging possible in your opinion, Sebastian?
It's a frank reply. No, I really don't believe so. I think similarly to what I said earlier, that in food policy discussion, some nutrients are considered bad for your health, which is absolutely not the case. I don't want that plastic is being seen and considered as the next scapegoat. Plastic is truly a sensible option, especially right for us, for our sector. And there certainly is essential for the food and drink sector in general. So we have, however, to generate less virgin plastics, to close the loop of circularity and preserve our natural resources as much as possible. So, as you know, plastic is most probably not the biggest culprit when it comes to waste. What about other materials? So I really would like, to take the focus away and say, this is bad. No, this is here. It's here to stay. We're going to close the circularity. We're going to develop technologies and alternatives, and we will become more green, if I may say, with plastics. But getting rid of plastics, sorry, show me any other material that can do that. I don't see any for the time being.
We agree with that. There's every other thing at the moment would be deemed as greenwashing for certain aspects, indeed. So to wrap up this episode, do you have anything you would like to add, or everything you've told us?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with all of you. Thank you really for the questions. I hope, with our point of view from the European Snacks Association and specifically, from the suppliers like you, like Vatron, it's great that we have these forward-thinking and innovative companies like yours around the table that can help our manufacturer members in order to play, a pivotal role in the discussion and for the consumers themselves and for our environment and nature in order to become greener and really make a positive impact for everybody's lives. So thank you very much for that.
You're welcome, and thank you for taking the time to answer our questions. Thank you, Michaela.
Thank you.
And so this wraps up this episode. So thanks very much, Sebastian, again. Stay tuned for our listeners for the next episode with other exciting stakeholders in the packaging industry, in the packaging world. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.